All right, welcome back into Yellowhammer Radio with Cliff Sims, Scott Beeson, Big Jeffrey Myers. Actually, no, it's Encyclopedia Jeff now. I gotta make sure I get that right. That's stuck, by the way.
Well, thank you, sir.
You are Encyclopedia Jeff.
I can handle that one. I like that.
If you've been listening to the program for the last month or so, we've been having on Jeff Roberts, who is a private wealth advisor with Ameriprise Financial Services. He'll come on the program and kind of make some sense of things for us. He'll look at historical trends, historical data, for instance, to say, under what party does the stock market perform better? Or what should I be thinking about when I'm looking at the presidential race and the markets are chaotic and they're up and down, and how should I be thinking about those kind of things? He's come on and done an incredible job walking us through what are some very, very complex issues when it comes to our finances. And that's why it's important to get somebody who knows what they're talking about when it comes to financial issues. I can't think of anybody smarter than Jeff Roberts. He's based right here in Birmingham. He's the man. He's not only a private wealth advisor, he's also a certified kingdom advisor, which I didn't know what this meant until recently. But basically, it's somebody who can help you give financial advice and guidance to you from a biblical perspective. So it's just a really cool thing. And Jeff is one of those guys. On top of that, he's been named to Barron's top 1,200 financial advisors in the whole doggone country. So local guy, but he's doing big things. And so we want to bring Jeff back on today to talk about a new topic. Before we get to what that topic is, let's bring in the man, the myth, the legend, Jeff Roberts. Jeff, how are you today, sir?
I'm just fine, Cliff. Now I'm wondering, you've been having theme music for me in the past. I guess Rush is no longer on the agenda.
We blew that. That's Encyclopedia Jeff's fault.
That's on me.
That's all right. We'll do better next time. But yeah,
cross my
heart. Good, brother. We're good.
So with the elections getting closer, I'm sure there's been a lot of rumbling out there, and I've seen some of it among the candidates about income taxes. Are federal income taxes going to go up? Are they going to go down? Who's going to pay more taxes? Who's going to pay less taxes? Who pays the most taxes now? There's a lot of questions with regard to taxes that I thought you may be the perfect person to bring on and talk about this. Give us some light on the issue of federal income taxes, Jeff. Is there any data out there that helps us understand the money our government collects in income taxes?
There is. My research found a few organizations that are dedicated to showing Americans how taxes and government spending and regulations affect them, to nonpartisan research and educational organizations that I saw, for example, were the Tax Policy Center and the National Taxpayers Union Foundation. Of course, I don't really endorse these organizations, but I use them as a reference for organizing the data that is released by the IRS.
So as they looked at the IRS data, and you've kind of looked at through their research, what does it show? What can we learn from the IRS data?
It's interesting. Well, and again, first, all this originates from the Internal Revenue Service, and the IRS released its data for 2013, that tax year, earlier this year. So the information that's available is most recent, but it's 2 tax years old. And the first thing that sticks out to me is the income levels that are broken out into percentiles. And for example, if I were to ask you or any listener, do you have any idea of what the top 1% income earners is in the entire United States? In other words, how much money you have to make in order to be in the top 1%. And you may be surprised to know that it's $428,000 a year, and I'm rounding and change.
Yeah, I think that would surprise a lot of people, Jeff, not to cut you off, but I think a lot of people, when you say top 1%, at least the way the media portrays it, these are the people with private jets. These are the people making $10 million a year or whatever it may be to be in the top 1%. So you're saying top 1%, about $428,000, somewhere around in there.
That's correct, and that's exactly right. That it seems alarming because you would think that the number is much, much higher. And of course, the people that have those private jets are in that top 1%.
Sure.
But when you look at the IRS numbers in terms of tax returns, the top 1% is people that a household income that has $428,000 or more. Now, don't get me wrong; it's a ton of money. I don't want to make it sound like it's not, but certainly would have thought that it was a bigger number. And then this is even more interesting. The top 5% income earners in the United States are households that have $179,000 income. You're in the top 5% if your household has 179. Now, let's use an example, and it's not exact, but just to give you a number. In the state of New York, with inflation and everything that they have, a school teacher married to a firefighter is likely making a household income of $179,000 a year.
Wow.
Do you think they feel like they're in the top 5% income earners of the country?
I guarantee they don't living up there. That's for sure.
There's no doubt. So it's interesting when you look at the way incomes are broken out and the weightings population-wise. The other interesting thing is that the top 10% income earners are people that have a household income of $127,000 or more, and the interesting, too, is the bottom 50th percentile, meaning half the population of tax returns, is people that are under $36,000 a year in household income. So half the population is under $36,000 in annual income.
Wow. So do we know what percentage of the taxes are paid by each of these particular groups?
Yeah, the numbers released by the IRS kind of summarize that. And an example is if you're in the top 1% income earners where your household income is $428,000 a year or more, those households pay 37.8, let's call it 38% of all the income taxes collected in the United States. So the top 1% income earners are paying 38% of all taxes, which is amazing to think about as a percentage. The top 5% income earners, which is people that have $179,000 in income a year or more, they're paying 59%, let's round it, call 60% of all taxes collected come from the top 5% income earners. And then the top 10% income earners, which are $127,000 or more, they're paying about 70% of all taxes. And if you're in the top 25% income earners, which is $75,000 a year or more in household income, that group of people pays 86% of all the taxes collected in the United States.
Wow. Now,
and I was going to say one more, though, is the bottom 50th percentile, people that earn under $36,000 a year pay 2.78% of all the taxes collected.
And those percentages are disproportionate to the percentage of the actual income that they make in the country, correct? Like even
Correct.
If you're at top 1%, you're paying 38% of the taxes. Do you make 38% of the country's income?
Good point. In the top 1%, they're making about 19% of all the income in the United States. It's a percentage of income if you're in the top 1%. If you're in the top 5%, then you have about 34% of all the income in the United States. The bottom half of the population, which represents about, again, 50%, $36,000 a year in income or less, that represents about 11% of all taxable income.
Wow. So we're talking to Jeff Roberts from Ameriprise and Jeff Roberts and Associates. Jeff, what has been the trend of these percentage weightings historically? Are we at a point now where the top 1% or the high income earners in general, are they paying a greater percentage in personal income tax than they have in years past, or what does history show us there? Yeah,
the National Taxpayers Union Foundation, when they were summarizing the data, they went all the way back to 1980, and where in 2013, which is the most recent data we have, the top 1% income earners, they're paying about 38% of all taxes collected. Back in 1980, they were only paying 20% of all taxes collected. So the top 1% are shouldering more of the tax burden now than they did back in 1980, almost double. And then the bottom income earners back in 1980 were shouldering about 7% of all the taxes collected, where now they're shouldering about 2.78% of all the taxes.
Wow. So tying this back to the current political elections, what should we do with this information? Are there any things that we can learn from this data that apply to this election specifically?
Well, I think so. And, I start by saying, of course, I'm a private wealth advisor, and I'm not a politician, and I'm not here to preach a Republican or Democrat agenda. That's not the point. But candidates today are making promises. And so if a candidate's making a promise to, whether it's build a wall or to make college tuition free for the middle class or debt-free for all, we should ask, how are we going to pay for these things? Who's going to pay for these things? And if the answer is we're going to pay for these things because Wall Street or corporations or the super rich or wealthy people are going to start to pay their fair share, well, we may want to reconsider the accuracy of that assertion and really what is considered wealthy people, because it seems like when we're in the top 1% or top 5% or top 10%, that's not necessarily wealthy people, although their incomes are in the top percentile. So if an individual stands on a mountaintop and screams, smoking doesn't cause cancer, well, that's nonsense. The facts clearly show otherwise. And so if someone stands on a mountaintop, that same mountaintop, and yells, American families in the top income percentile are not already paying their fair share of taxes, well, that's nonsense too. The facts show that the person on the mountaintop's simply wrong. So I kind of ask, well, where are the people at the foot of the mountain saying, shame on you for being misleading? The facts show that the people who are sometimes challenged for being successful are the very people who are shouldering an overwhelming lion's share of the tax burden in this country. And a big thanks to them. They're patriots. And if indeed the United States is in a desperate need for additional revenue, tax revenue, to fix our problems like pay down our debt or build our roads or improve our schools, perhaps we should ask those most successful among us and ask them to dig deeper in order to save the country rather than demonize them and lift them as the solutions to the problem versus the cause of it.
Right on. That's Jeff Roberts. This is why I bring him on. Jeff, if folks are hearing what you're talking about, and it's undeniable when they hear you talk that you know exactly what you're talking about, if they want to get in touch with you with ways that you and Jeff Roberts and Associates in general can help them with their finances, how can they do that?
You can go to our website, jeffrobertsandassociates.com, or give us a call at 313-9150.
All right, great. Jeff, thanks for joining us today, buddy.
Thanks, Cliff.
All right, let's take a quick break. We'll come back and wrap this thing up.
This is Yellowhammer Radio.